Samuel Little, considered the most prolific serial killer in the U.S., he confessed to 93 murders and the FBI has confirmed at least 60. Samuel Little, the story of America's most prolific serial killer. Samuel Little, a name that remained relatively unknown for decades, ultimately became infamous as America's most prolific serial killer. Responsible for the murders of at least 60 confirmed victims, and potentially as many as 93, Little's reign of terror spanned over 4 decades, from 1970 to 2005. His case highlights the failures of the justice system, the vulnerabilities of marginalized communities, and the relentless pursuit of justice by investigators who finally brought him to account. Samuel Little was born on June 7, 1940, in Reynolds, Georgia. His mother was reportedly a teenage sex worker, and he grew up in a turbulent environment. Raised primarily by his grandmother in Lorain, Ohio, Little displayed early signs of antisocial behavior. He struggled academically and frequently got into trouble, ultimately dropping out of high school. As a teenager, Little began committing petty crimes, including theft and assault. By the 1960s, he had been arrested multiple times across various states for offenses ranging from shoplifting to fraud. However, he often avoided serious punishment, serving short jail sentences before returning to a transient lifestyle. Little's killing spree officially began in 1970 and continued until 2005. His victims were mostly women, many of whom were sex workers, drug users, or individuals living in poverty. These women were often overlooked by law enforcement, allowing Little to evade capture for decades. Little had a distinct modus operandi. He would lure women into his vehicle, often under the guise of offering them a ride. Once alone with them, he would physically assault, strangle, and ultimately kill them. Unlike many serial killers, Little did not use weapons. He preferred strangulation, relishing the sense of control it gave him. He often left his victims in remote locations, making it difficult for authorities to connect the murders. Despite being arrested numerous times for violent crimes, including assault and attempted murder, Little repeatedly slipped through the cracks of the justice system. Because many of his victims were marginalized women, their deaths were frequently misclassified as overdoses, accidental deaths, or natural causes. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Little was arrested multiple times in different states. In 1982, he was charged with the murder of 22-year-old Patricia Mount in Florida. However, due to unreliable witness testimonies, he was acquitted. He was also suspected of murders in Mississippi and other states, but was never convicted. In 1984, he was arrested in San Diego for kidnapping and strangling 2 women, who miraculously survived. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but served only 2.5 before being released. After his release, he resumed his murderous spree, moving from state to state to evade authorities. Despite years of evading justice, Little was finally caught in 2012 at a homeless shelter in Kentucky. He was extradited to California on drug charges, but while in custody, investigators linked him to 3 unsolved murders in Los Angeles from the late 1980s using newly available DNA evidence. The victims, Carol Alford, 1987, Audrey Nelson, 1989, and Guadalupe Apodaca, 1989, had all been strangled, and DNA left on their bodies matched Little. In 2014, he was convicted of their murders and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While serving his sentence, Little began to confess to additional murders in 2018. Texas Rangers and FBI agents interviewed him, and he detailed an astonishing number of killings, claiming to have murdered 93 women across 19 states. Investigators were initially skeptical, but Little provided intricate details about each murder, including locations, dates, and victims' appearances. He even created detailed sketches of many of his victims, some of whom remained unidentified. These confessions allowed authorities to link him definitively to at least 60 murders, confirming him as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. His ability to evade capture for so long was due, in part, to the lack of communication between different law enforcement agencies and societal biases against his victims. Many of the cases had been dismissed as overdoses or undetermined deaths, meaning Little's horrific acts remained undiscovered for years. Samuel Little remained incarcerated at the California State Prison, Los Angeles County, where he died on December 30th, 2020, at the age of 80. Although he had serious health issues, including diabetes and heart disease, the official cause of death was not publicly disclosed. His case remains one of the most chilling in American history. His confessions helped bring closure to many families who had spent decades searching for answers. Law enforcement agencies continue to investigate unsolved cases that may be linked to Little, hoping to identify additional victims and provide justice for those forgotten by the system. Samuel Little's case prompted major discussions about flaws in the justice system, particularly in handling crimes against marginalized individuals. His ability to avoid detection for so long exposed significant issues, including racial and socioeconomic biases in law enforcement and the failure of agencies to share information across jurisdictions. His case also highlighted the importance of forensic advancements, especially DNA analysis, in solving cold cases. Without modern DNA technology, Little may never have been identified as a serial killer, and the true extent of his crimes may have remained unknown. Samuel Little's murderous rampage remains a grim reminder of how society often fails to protect its most vulnerable members. While justice eventually caught up with him, his story underscores the need for improved investigative methods, better cooperation among law enforcement agencies, and greater attention to cases involving marginalized victims. As investigators continue to connect his confessions to real-life cases, his legacy serves as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth by those who seek justice for the forgotten.